welcome back to the channel. Today, we're stepping into the fascinating world of the Edwardian era to explore what daily life was truly like for families living over a century ago. From morning routines and bustling kitchens to leisure, education, and the subtle changes unfolding around them, we'll step inside their homes and experience life as it really unfolded. So sit back, relax, and let's travel back in time to uncover the everyday lives, struggles, and joys of Edwardian families. Imagine stepping back into Britain at the dawn of the 1900s, what historians now call the Edwardian era. The first thing you notice isn't silence, but the blend of old and new everywhere you look. Horses still clatter over cobbled streets, leaving their traces behind, but alongside them, new motor cars roar past, noisy and temperamental. Gas lamps glow softly along the avenues, yet here and there, strange, bright electric bulbs flicker in shop windows and upper-class homes. There's a palpable sense of expectation in the air, as if the entire country knows it stands between two worlds, one fading, one just beginning. The Edwardian family lived right at the heart of that transformation, behind almost every front door. Whether small and weather-worn or polished and grand, daily routines unfolded with a familiarity that feels both distant and strangely recognizable. Morning arrives early. In working-class neighborhoods, the streets stir before sunrise. Boots echo on stone, factory whistles sound in the distance, and doors quietly close as countless days begin. Fathers and many sons, not yet fully grown, step out into the chill air, shoulders already carrying the weight of the day. They walk to shipyards, textile mills, mines, railway yards, and workshops. Some ride trams packed tightly with others heading in the same direction, faces tired but determined. Breakfast is rarely elaborate. A mug of strong tea, a slice of bread, perhaps porridge, if the cupboard allows. There is no lingering, no luxury of conversation. Time is dictated by factory clocks, supervisors, and the relentless need to keep wages coming. Inside those same small houses, mothers are already at work too. Fires must be coaxed back to life, coal carefully rationed, ash cleared, and kettles heated. Laundry sloshes in tin basins, and children must be dressed, fed, and sent off, some to school, others to errands or apprenticeships. Nothing about the morning is leisurely. Everything is done with purpose, born of necessity. Even warmth is something earned, not guaranteed. Just a short tram ride away, morning unfolds differently in middle-class homes. These households often represent rising opportunity clerks, shopkeepers, teachers, managers, and professionals. Their homes are tidy, modest, and full of pride. Patterned carpets soften the floors. Family photographs, carefully posed, watch from mantels. A piano sometimes sits in the front parlor, waiting for an evening when someone has the time and energy to play. Here too, the day begins early, but often someone else has already begun it for them. Many middle-class families employ at least one young servant girl. She likely came from the countryside, leaving behind parents and siblings to earn wages in the city. Her morning starts in darkness, quietly moving from room to room. She shakes out rugs, lights the fires, polishes shoes, fetches coal, and prepares breakfast. Though still little more than a teenager, she carves out a place in the complicated hierarchy of the household, visible yet invisible, essential yet often unnoticed. By the time the family descends the stairs, the home looks effortlessly peaceful, as if it naturally maintains itself. The parents dress with care, because appearance is more than vanity is reputation. Layers of clothing create structure and formality. Men knot ties and brush jackets. Women fasten corsets and arrange hair with precision. Even children participate in this ritual of respectability. Boys tug on short trousers and stiff collars. Girls step into dresses that restrict movement but signal propriety. To live respectably is to be seen as respectably in Edwardian society. That matters deeply. Step even further upward on the social ladder, and you enter yet another world, the country estates and grand townhouses of the wealthy. Here, mourning resembles a choreographed performance, with every participant knowing their role. Butlers oversee the pantry, their authority unquestioned below stairs. Footmen glide silently through corridors, their uniforms crisp, their movements practiced. Housemaids work methodically, dusting rooms the family rarely sets foot in, except on special occasions. Down in the kitchen, the cook commands an entire domain of simmering pots, baking bread, and clattering pans. All of this often happens before the first member of the family even rings a bell. In these grand homes, the family themselves rarely engage with the manual labor that sustains their comfort. The day opens with gentlemen reading newspapers, discussing politics, stock prices, or estate matters. Ladies review social calendars, plan visits, write letters, and decide what the household should present to the outside world. Everything is orderly, controlled, and layered with etiquette. Yet beneath the polished surface lies an undercurrent of pressure to uphold status, to behave correctly, to fulfill roles inherited rather than chosen. Across all these homes, big or small, you notice something the longer you watch. The morning isn't simply about waking up. It's about setting the rhythm of the entire day. It's about structure, responsibility, and expectation. Even children feel it. Some walk to school, along crowded streets, carrying slates and books bound with strings. School is strict and formal, ruled by discipline and order. Others, however, never make it to school at all, stepping instead into apprenticeships, errands, or domestic service because their families need every possible income. Childhood is not yet universally protected. It bends according to necessity. In inside kitchens, breakfast is often prepared quietly, thoughtfully, and with the constant calculation of resources. Coal must last, bread must stretch, milk must not spoil too quickly. The idea of waste feels almost immoral, and thrift becomes a daily skill. Even in the wealthiest households, waste is frowned upon, though, for very different reasons. There, it is not scarcity, but propriety that demands restraint. Extravagance must appear controlled, not reckless. Meanwhile, outside each doorway, the world itself is buzzing with transition. Streets are cleaner than they were in previous decades, though still far from sanitary. Public transportation links neighborhoods in ways previous generations could only imagine. Newspapers arrive with headlines full of invention, exploration, and empire. People read about discoveries, scientific advances, and technological marvels with fascinational electricity, telephones, moving pictures. Progress feels inevitable, unstoppable, almost magical. Yet despite this excitement, life remains grounded in routines, especially within the family. Every member knows their part, even if they sometimes question it in private moments. Fathers feel the burden of providing, mothers shoulder the constant, invisible labor of maintaining order. Children absorb expectations through repetition, imitation, and the relentless reminders of adults. These patterns shape identity long before anyone realizes it. Still, there are softer details woven into the ordinary bustle of morning. A mother reminding a child to tuck in a scarf against the cold. A father pausing just long enough to glance toward the window where his family stands, waving goodbye. A servant girl warming her hands for a brief second by the stove before climbing another flight of stairs with a cold scuttle. In those brief glances and movements, you glimpse both love and duty tied together, so tightly they're impossible to separate. The Edwardian family carries itself with a sense of confidence, belief that society is stable, that roles make sense, that the world is ordered. Few imagine how fragile that order truly is. They look at expanding factories, glittering theaters, and busy railway stations, and see only growth. They read about distant colonies, foreign monarchs, and international affairs, and feel assured that their nation stands secure at the heart of it all. What they cannot see from their breakfast tables, from their shop counters, or from the polished dining rooms of their estates, is how quickly the future will arrive. For now, though, life continues in carefully shaped routines. Fires are lit, meals prepared, clocks wound, hats retrieved from hooks, doors opened and closed again. Every day feels like part of a long, steady pattern that has existed forever and will continue unchanged. And that is the quiet beauty and illusion of Edwardian mornings. They seem ordinary, predictable, almost comforting. They hide both the strain beneath them and the storm that history is preparing beyond the horizon. But in those early hours, as families gather briefly at their tables or pass silently in the hallways, they believe quite simply that the world they know will last step through the front door of an Edwardian house, and you immediately sense that the home is not just a shelter, it is a statement. The walls, the furniture, the smells from the kitchen, even the sound of footsteps across the floorboards tell a story about the family who lives there. To understand daily life in this era, you have to understand that the Edwardian home was as much about appearances and social expectations as it was about warmth and safety. It shaped the rhythms of life from the moment someone entered until the last light was extinguished late at night. Start in the neighborhoods where families lived, rows of small brick houses stretching almost endlessly. The front step is scrubbed regularly because the outside woe. Inside, the rooms are narrow, ceilings low, and space carefully used. The front room may be kept tidy and formal, reserved for guests or special occasions, if that means the family squeezes into the back room to live. Many homes share a yard with other families. At the back stands the outdoor toilet, cold in winter, uncomfortable in rain, impossible to ignore, but something everyone learns to live with. A single tap or pump may serve not just one family, but several, turning water into something you carry rather than something that arrives at your command. The air inside carries the blended scent of cold smoke, boiled cabbage, damp walls, and soap. Mothers move constantly because there's always something to do. Laundry takes hours, and often days soaking, scrubbing, wringing, hanging, bringing, in ironing with heavy irons heated on the stove. Clothes must be patched and mended, passed down from older children to younger ones, carefully folded into drawers that never seem large enough. The kitchen is the true heart of the house. Almost everything happens there: cooking, washing, ironing, talking, comforting, arguing, dreaming. A pot on the stove may hold stew, stretching across several meals, sazonally enriched, if extra meat can be afforded, but just as often thin. To make it last, privacy barely exists. Children share beds, sometimes sleeping top-to-tail to make room. Grandparents or unmarried relatives may live under the same roof. Personal thoughts and private worries are carried quietly inside hearts, because there simply isn't a corner where someone can be alone. Yet, for all its limits, this world has its own sense of warmth. Families talk at table, share jokes, tell stories, and cling to moments of tenderness. The house may be small, but it is also the center of their pride. Floors are swept, brass is polished, curtains washed when possible, because dignity is not measured by money alone, but by effort and care. Move outward to the growing suburbs, and you step into the world of the Edwardian middle class. These homes are larger, brighter, designed with small gardens and decorative details that give them personality. A hallway leads into neatly defined rooms: a sitting room for guests, a dining room for family meals, a kitchen at the back where much of the unseen work happens. Patterned wallpapers carry floral designs. Framed photographs show weddings, family portraits, and stiffly posed children. On mantels and shelves sit souvenirs: seashells from a holiday by the coast, small porcelain ornaments, carefully displayed books. These objects are not accidental. They communicate respectability, culture, and aspiration. Electricity might be appearing one room at a time. A single electric lamp, glowing with uncertain brilliance, becomes both marvel and conversation piece. Yet, fireplaces still dominate the rooms because heat remains local, not central. Families gather close to the hearth in winter, with chairs arranged just far enough away to avoid ash, but close enough to feel warmth. The sound of coal crackling becomes part of the soundtrack of evening life. Rooms upstairs serve specific functions: nursery, where children play and sleep; a study, where father might handle bills and correspondence; bedrooms that reflect personal status in the household. Even the staircase itself carries meaning. The idea of upstairs and downstairs begins long before one reaches the homes of the wealthy. In these homes, order is essential. Furniture is arranged with intention. Ornaments are dusted daily. Calendars are filled with social visits, church meetings, charitable events, music lessons, or school functions. The house becomes both a retreat from the world and a stage upon which family life must look proper. Women take pride in managing it, even if they rely on a servant to help. They plan meals, supervise cleaning, organize gatherings, and ensure children behave in ways that reflect well on the family. A mother's labor is quiet, constant, and often invisible: the steady hand keeping the clock of the household ticking. And then there are the homes of the wealthy, where the boundary between public grandeur and private life becomes striking. Approach one of these residences, and you're greeted not by a modest door, but by sweeping driveways, manicured lawns, and elegant facades designed to impress. Inside, spacious entry halls open into multiple rooms decorated with polished wood, velvet drapes, oil paintings, and elaborate carpets. Every object seems chosen to declare status: chandeliers, dangling crystal light, grand pianos shining in corner parlors, gilded mirrors reflecting enormous rooms back upon themselves. Yet, this magnificence comes with layers. Beneath the family spaces lies a world of servants' passages, kitchens, storerooms, and quarters, the invisible infrastructure that makes all the elegance possible. Bells hidden in walls connect rooms to a board in the servants' hall. When one rings, a maid hurries silently to respond. Servants move quickly but discreetly, expected to be efficient but rarely to intrude. The household is divided by both physical and social boundaries, not hostile, but unmistakable. Children in these homes are raised under strict routines, managed by nannies and governesses, often spending less time with their parents than their caregivers. They eat in nurseries, not dining rooms, until old enough to join adult conversation. Even family dinners follow ritual patterns with multiple courses served in precise order and specific rules governing who speaks, who sits where, and how everyone behaves. The home becomes not only a place of comfort, but a training ground in manners, self-control, and class identity. But for all the differences in comfort and wealth, there is something shared across all Edwardian homes: the idea that the household is the anchor of life. It is where dreams take shape and disappointments settle. It is where news is absorbed, births, illnesses, job changes, opportunities, losses. Walls witness laughter as much as sorrow. A family might silently worry together when factory layoffs are rumored. Another might debate over tea whether to purchase a new piece of furniture or save for a future holiday. Decisions feel meaningful because they ripple through everyone who shares the roof. Inside every Edwardian kitchen, regardless of class, you find the art of resourcefulness. Recipes evolve around what is affordable, what can last, what fills stomachs. While still feeling nourishing, women calculate almost instinctively how much flour remains, how to stretch milk by mixing it with water, when to bake bread so it coincides with the heat already being used for dinner. Even in grand houses, this practicality exists, though carried out by cooks rather than mistresses. Leftovers are repurposed bones boiled, pastry scraps turned into new dishes. Hospitality depends less on abundance than on careful planning. There is also an emotional life to the house that outsiders rarely glimpse. In smaller homes, arguments sometimes flare over money, chores, or tired tempers, yet just as often, laughter follows quickly because living closely forces reconciliation. In middle-class homes, quiet tensions can arise between the desire for comfort and the fear of financial decline. A new rug or piano might symbolize success, yet also represent risk. And in wealthy homes, among all the grandeur, there may be loneliness. Large rooms echo when relationships grow distant and expectations press down as heavily as any financial worry. Look closer, and you see how the Edwardian home shapes the roles people play. A father returning from work feels the transition as he steps through the door, leaving public life for the authority, sometimes warmth, sometimes silence of home. A mother moves between manager, caregiver, diplomat, and emotional center often, without outward recognition. Children learn instinctively who makes decisions, who must be obeyed, where they may play, and when they must retreat. The rhythm becomes so natural that few question it openly, even when it constrains personal hopes. Home decoration itself becomes a language. Heavy drapes and dark furniture might signal old-fashioned respectability, while lighter fabrics and floral patterns whisper of modern tastes. In some houses, pictures of the royal family hang prominently. In others, religious texts or inspirational sayings occupy important wall space. Each object reinforces values that the family wants to project both inward and outward. Even modest households display something symbolic: a clock gifted at a wedding, a china set used only on Sundays, a beloved framed postcard of a faraway seaside town. Listen closely, and you hear the soundtrack of Edwardian domestic life, the constant crackle of fires, the clatter of dishes being washed, the ticking of clocks, footsteps on wooden stairs, the rustle of newspapers, the clink of teacups, the murmur of parents whispering decisions after children have gone to bed. Occasionally laughter bursts through, followed by the soothing hush of evening settling in as lamps are dimmed and doors locked for the night. Outside, the world might be changing rapidly. Machines, politics, inventions, but inside, the home acts like a protective shell, holding on to familiar rituals. Yet even this sense of security has cracks. Damp walls breed illness. Crowded streets make infections spread. Jobs are never guaranteed. A sudden injury or economic downturn can threaten to unravel everything a family has built. Middle-class households fear slipping downward if bills cannot be paid. Servants worry about losing positions or failing to meet expectations. Wealthy families quietly measure estates, investments, and alliances to keep their world stable. The house is both sanctuary and arena where the delicate balance of fortune and effort is constantly negotiated. Toward evening, as coal smoke drifts from chimneys and lamps glow along the roads, the children return from school or errands, fathers from workplaces, mothers and servants from endless cycles of chores. Supper brings people together, whether around a rough table, scarred by years of use, or a polished one, adorned with candles. Conversation might range from mundane details to dreams of what life could become. Afterward, some families gather around the fireplace to read aloud or tell stories. Others simply rest, listening to the house settle into quiet. All this reveals that the Edwardian home was never merely a physical structure. It was a world of rules and warmth, expectations and comforts, struggles and small triumphs. Every class experienced it differently, yet all relied on it deeply within those walls. Lives unfolded in ways both ordinary and profound. The home preserved dignity during hardship, displayed status when possible, and taught each generation where they belonged in a society layered by tradition to walk through an Edwardian house today in imagination or in memories to realize how much daily life revolved around maintaining order, protecting identity, and creating stability in a rapidly changing world. Every rug, every scuffed stair, every polished tea set carries echoes of hands that worked, worried, loved, and hoped there. And although the architecture and technology would change dramatically in the years ahead. The emotional weight of home, the feeling that everything important begins and ends there, remained one of the defining experiences of Edwardian family life. Food in the Edwardian era was never just food. It was memory, survival, pride, and hierarchy, and laid out on plates and platters. If you want to understand how families truly lived, you have to imagine the sights and smells of their kitchens, the sounds of knives on cutting boards, the quiet rituals of meals, and the sharp differences between those who had enough and those who rarely did. Across Britain, the simple act of gathering around the table revealed who belonged where in society and what each person could hope for from life itself. Picture the beginning of an ordinary Edwardian morning in a working-class neighborhood. The kitchen is already awake before the rest of the house truly opens its eyes. Coal crackles in the stove, though not too much, as coal costs money. A kettle rattles as it heats, steam ghosting upward across a patched wall. A loaf of bread sits on the table to keep it from going stale too quickly. A mother slices it carefully, making each piece thin enough to stretch across several meals. She spreads dripping the cooled fat left over from cooking across the slices, adding just enough salt to coax out flavor. For those who can afford it, maybe there's jam once or twice a week. For many, tea substitutes for breakfast more often than they'd like to admit. Hot liquid fills the belly, and for the moment, hunger quiets. Children sit at the table, rubbing sleep from their eyes, rushing because school or errands or factory whistles do not wait. No one wastes much time. Meal times for these families are practical fuel for work. Fathers may already have left before sunrise with a hurried bite, or they may appear briefly, eating with one eye on the clock. Conversation is simple and direct. Who needs shoes repaired? Whether there's enough for tonight's dinner? Whether rumors at the factory are good or troubling? There is affection, but not the luxury of lingering. Daily energy depends on how wisely the household stretches what little it has. Meanwhile, across town, in a middle-class kitchen, breakfast looks modest but structured: porridge, eggs, toast, perhaps bacon on good days. A servant girl sets the table, placing plates and cups where they belong. The mistress of the house might give instructions quietly, ensuring there is balance between comfort and thrift. The family eats together when possible, not because they must, but because it reflects order. Children learn to sit straight, speak clearly, pass dishes rather than reaching. Even the simplest meal carries lessons in behavior. And then there are the homes where breakfast is only the opening gesture in a long and carefully orchestrated day of eating. In grand houses, the family descends at different times, choosing from an array of dishes laid out like a subtle performance: omelets, sausages, kippers, fresh bread, imported fruit, all prepared by others and served with grace. The newspapers rustle, tea pours delicately, and silverware clinks quietly, reminding everyone that refinement is as important as nourishment. Servants glide around the edges of the room, attentive yet unseen, making sure plates fill and empty without interruption. But even here, food is never careless. Wealth may make choices easier, but ritual still governs everything. Meals are governed by time, etiquette, and tradition that stretch back generations. For the wealthy, the table is a stage on which respectability and superiority are gently reaffirmed day after day. across all classes. The midday meal marks an important pause in the rhythm of work, though what that pause looks like depends entirely on circumstance. For laborers, lunch might be eaten outdoors or in factory break rooms, bread folded around cheese, perhaps a cold potato, sometimes leftover stew carried in a tin. They sit together, resting hands roughened by machinery or tools, talking about wages, strikes, and hopes that next week might be better. The meal is simple, but it binds people together. In those brief moments, laughter erupts, frustrations pour out, and worries feel lighter. Middle-class homes might see a smaller midday meal, such as sandwiches or soup saving the main dinner. For evening, when the family can gather again, housewives quietly plan menus with careful attention to cost. They flip through cookbooks or handwritten recipe collections, making mental notes about what ingredients will stretch furthest. They have learned to master not only cooking, but accounting, transforming things into meals. In the grand dining rooms of the wealthy, luncheon may include multiple delicate courses, some cold meats, salads, tarts eaten with deliberate pacing. Each element has its proper dish, proper fork, proper way of serving. These dining spaces with high ceilings and polished wood exist partly to impress guests and partly to reinforce a sense of order that mirrors the larger society. Here, the idea of scarcity feels far away, though it quietly shapes the lower floors where servants measure portions for themselves. As evening approaches, the most symbolic meal of the day emerges: dinner. For working families, dinner is more than warmth, it is hope. A pot simmers patiently, often built from whatever ingredients could be found or afforded. Vegetables softened in broth, scraps of meat added for flavor, barley to thicken. Children wait eagerly for bowls to be set down, sometimes dipping bread into the stew, even before being told they may begin. A rare Sunday roast becomes an event remembered all week, not only for the meat itself, but for the rituals surrounding it. Families sit longer, talk more, sometimes even relax enough to forget the harsh edges of the day. Mothers perform near miracles in these kitchens. They balance hunger, health, and strict budgets with constant creativity. Every leftover has purpose-boned soups, fried potatoes, bread puddings, and pies filled with whatever is available appear like small gifts from limited ingredients. Nothing can be wasted, not because of strict rules, but because waste threatens survival. As children grow, they understand instinctively why plates must be cleaned and crumbs swept carefully into containers rather than thrown out. In middle-class homes, the evening meal reinforces respectability. The table is set with cloth, napkins folded neatly, perhaps flowers in a simple vase. The father sits at the head, the mother nearby, children arranged according to age. Dishes arrive in courses: soup, main dish, dessert. Even if each portion is modest, the ritual gives shape to family life, marking a boundary between the outer world of business, school, and news, and the inward world of shared identity. Here, family values are taught not by speeches, but through the repetition of nightly habits: waiting for everyone to be served, thanking the cook, avoiding complaints unless something is seriously wrong. In upper-class households, dinner can feel almost theatrical. Guests may join, candles glow. A butler directs the sequence of serving as though conducting an orchestra. Servants bring each course with quiet coordination, fish, poultry, game, sauces crafted with precision. Desserts gleam under polished light. Conversation drifts across politics, travel, literature, family alliances. Even silence carries meaning. A poorly chosen topic or awkward pause might reveal more than one intends. The family does not simply eat, they perform social expectations crafted over centuries. But beneath this glitter, deeper truths exist. For many servants, dinner is the most exhausting time of day. They move rapidly, lifting heavy trays, standing for long hours, timing every action perfectly. Their own meal may come much later down below stairs, often made from leftovers, still eaten with gratitude and laughter. They watch luxurious dishes pass through their hands without tasting them. Aware of their distance from the world they sustain, food also reveals something profound about gender. Women across classes, whether mistresses or maids, carry much of the responsibility for meals. They plan, prepare, manage, stretch, and serve. Cooking becomes both skill and burdened, mired when done well, criticized quickly when something fails. A burnt roast or poorly risen loaf might feel like a personal failure, not just a culinary one. Some women take pride in mastery, others feel trapped by endless repetition. Yet almost all understand that food is their daily negotiation with love, money, and expectation. Children learn from these kitchens too. They sneak tastes when adults aren't looking, help stir batter, peel potatoes, fetch water. They watch their elders' hands how dough is kneaded, how onions are chopped, how steam escapes lids. Through these small lessons, they absorb unspoken knowledge, what poverty tastes like, what celebration feels like, what sacrifice looks like in action. Seasonal rhythms also shape Edwardian tables. In summer, fresh vegetables appear in markets, carried in baskets from farms. Families pickle, jar, and preserve what they can, preparing for colder months when produce will be scarce. Autumn brings apples and root vegetables, stored carefully in cellars guarded against rot. Winter meals lean heavily on stews, porridge, and bread, comforting yet monotonous. Spring offers the first signs of renewal, greens returning to plates, a symbolic reminder that cycles endure. Technology begins to creep into this world, subtly changing kitchens without fully transforming them. Canning revolutionizes storage. New kitchen tools like grinders, hand-cranked mixers, and enamel cookware make preparation easier, though still labor-intensive. Recipes circulate through magazines and cookbooks, whispering of new possibilities. Housewives experiment cautiously, aware that failure wastes money. Meanwhile, wealthier homes embrace innovation, more boldly experimenting with imported ingredients and elaborate French techniques introduced by professional chefs. At the same time, markets, bakeries, and butchers form the beating commercial heart of food culture. Streets become living displays of consumption baskets filled with potatoes, hanging carcasses at butcher stalls, fish laid on beds of crushed ice, vendors shouting prices. Women bargaining over pennies demonstrate not stinginess but survival strategy. Knowledge of where to shop, when to go, and how to judge quality becomes as valuable as any formal education. These daily negotiations shape both diet and identity, connecting families to wider networks of trade and labor. Food insecurities cast long shadows. Illness sometimes grows from contaminated water or spoiled products improperly stored. Overcrowded neighborhoods lack sanitation, making outbreaks easier. Malnutrition weakens immune systems. Doctors warn parents to feed children milk, vegetables, and fresh fruit, but advice means little when wages cannot stretch that far. Some relief organizations deliver soup or bread to the poorest, yet charity rarely fills the gap fully. Hunger, though often hidden behind closed doors, remains a silent guest at many Edwardian tables. Still, in the midst of scarcity, ingenuity flourishes. Neighbors share ingredients. Families teach one another new ways to stretch meals. Community cookbooks emerge written not by elite chefs, but by ordinary women pulling household wisdom. These recipes preserve stories, which families endured layoffs, which learned to turn tough cuts of meat into tender dishes, which discovered tricks to sweeten desserts using minimal sugar. Food becomes a living archive of resilience. Meanwhile, for the wealthy, the table also tells a story, one of global connections. Spices arrive from distant colonies. Tea travels across oceans. Pineapples, bananas, and exotic fruits appear occasionally as luxury symbols. Few pause to consider the immense labor behind such items or the vast imperial system that makes them possible. Instead, these foods quietly reinforce a worldview in which Britain sees itself at the center of everything, entitled to the riches of faraway lands. Celebrations mark turning points in the year, transforming meals into ceremonies. Christmas dinner might include roast goose or turkey, potatoes roasted until golden, pudding steamed for hours and soaked gently in brandy. Weddings bring layered cakes and tables overflowing with offerings. Birthdays, even in the poorest homes, feature a small sweet treat or slightly richer dish than usual. These special meals stay in memory far longer than ordinary ones, proof that joy is possible even when resources are limited. But beyond feasts and scarcity, there is something more intimate about Edwardian meals. The table is where secrets sometimes surface, where parents announce decisions, where children confess mistakes, where tensions erupt or heal. A son might speak of wanting to leave school early to earn wages, and the conversation turns heavy. A daughter might timidly reveal dreams of work or study, testing the boundaries of the roles assigned to her. News of illnesses, promotions, deaths, and courtships all pass through the shared space of the table, tying emotional life to the very rhythm of daily nourishment, to the act of eating. Late nights have their own quiet rituals. After children sleep, parents might sit together, sipping tea, staring into the low embers of the fire. They speak softly about bills, uncertain futures, fading hopes, or cherished plans. In wealthier homes, guests linger over wine or port, discussing politics or art, while servants clear dishes. The table becomes a place where time stretches differently, more reflective as the rest of the world drifts into darkness. Yet despite class divides, a common thread connects all Edwardian families: the belief that meals anchor life. They organized days, shape social relationships, and offer grounding in an era filled with change. Industrialization may alter workplaces. New inventions may transform communication and transportation. But inside the home, the ritual of sitting together remains steady. It carries a sense of continuity, a promise that tomorrow, no matter the worry, there will again be bread to slice, tea to brew, dishes to wash, and stories to tell. What stands out most is the intense respect for food itself. Even among the wealthy, where abundance seems normal, cooks treat ingredients with care influenced by older traditions that value thrift. Wasting food is seen not only as foolish, but morally questionable. In poorer districts, this attitude grows even stronger, shaping habits that will last lifetimes. Children raised in these homes carry their lessons forward: gratitude, discipline, humility in the face of necessity. And so, as you picture the Edwardian family at their table, whether in a cramped kitchen or a glittering dining hall, you begin to see far more than plates and cutlery. You see a world negotiating scarcity and privilege, old customs and modern changes, strict rules and quiet defiance. You see a society that measures stability not through luxury alone, but through its ability to feed, gather, and sustain itself day after day. The story of Edwardian food is, in the end, the story of Edwardian life. It reveals who worked, who served, who controlled, who sacrificed, who dreamed. It shows how families expressed love not always through words, but through steaming bowls of soup, carefully cut slices of fruit, or crumbs saved for the next morning. It reminds us that history is not only written in grand events or political speeches, but also in kitchens, pantries, and tables where ordinary people lived out the quiet drama of survival and belonging. As afternoon drifts toward evening in Edwardian Britain, the rhythm of daily life begins to shift. The heat of industry, school, housework, and routine slowly cools. People turn homeward, and families gradually gather again beneath their roofs. For many Edwardian families, this late part of the day is when public life gives way to private ritual land, when the purpose of all the day's effort becomes most visible. You begin to see how home isn't simply a place to sleep. It is a stage on which social values, hopes, and quiet struggles are played out. The first to arrive are often the children who attend school. They spill out onto streets and lanes in clusters, shoes scuffing gravel, arms full of worn books. Some drift home reluctantly, lingering for moments of play before responsibilities resume. Others walk quickly, drawn by the promise of warmth and familiar smells coming from kitchen fires. For those who work instead of study, young apprentices, errand boys, factory girls, the return home has a different tone. Their hands may be rough, their backs aching, but there is still relief in crossing that doorway, knowing they have contributed something to the family purse. Inside the house, the sense of preparation intensifies. In working-class homes, mothers plan the evening meal like a quiet strategist. Pots simmer on the stove, each ingredient carefully stretched. Whatever was affordable at the market now becomes dinner, perhaps boiled potatoes, cabbage, a bit of meat or fish, if fortune allowed, thick bread, and always tea, the dependable comfort of nearly every table. The smell fills the narrow rooms, wrapping itself around the children who sit near the hearth, waiting, whispering, sometimes arguing in low voices. The kitchen is both workplace and sanctuary, and the mother, often exhausted, still holds the center with practiced resilience. In these households, space is scarce and privacy nearly non-existent. Multiple children share a single bedroom. Parents, Sleep with infants close by. Every intimate conversation risks being overheard. Yet within that closeness grows a deep sense of shared survival. Stories are exchanged, not because there is leisure to fill, but because presence is all they have. A boy might talk about the scolding he narrowly avoided at school. A girl may whisper about a neighbor who left for service in the big city outside. The world is changing fast, but inside these walls, the day ends much as it began. Practical, focused, rooted in necessity. A short tram ride away, dinner unfolds in a slightly more ordered fashion. The middle-class family treats the evening meal as the anchor point of the day. The table is set with intention-polished cutlery, smooth plates, perhaps a simple centerpiece. A servant girl moves quietly through the dining room, placing dishes, warming plates, and doing. When the family sits, conversation has rules. Children speak when invited. The father may discuss his office work, the news headlines, or a rising colleague. The mother shares small household victories, how much butter was saved, which dress needs mending, which neighbor paid a visit. Everyone learns, without anyone saying it aloud, that dinner is about respectability as much as nourishment. Napkins, posture, and politeness are all lessons designed to prepare children for a society built on appearances. Yet beneath this respectable calm, unspoken tensions sometimes hum quietly. A young son dreams of factory machines becoming airplanes, or automobiles, things beyond his father's imagination. A daughter, clever and quick, secretly wonders if there is life outside marriage and domesticity. But for now, they nod, they listen. They play their parts, shaping themselves to expectations, reinforced each evening with every carefully portioned bite. Move higher still into Edwardian society, and the end of the day becomes an elaborate ritual, almost theatrical in precision. This is the world of long dining tables, silver polished to mirror shine, and multiple courses carried up from below stairs with military-like timing. Servants coordinate silently, communicating through glances, knowing exactly when to appear and when to disappear. The butler presides over everything, a figure of solemn authority who serves the meal without ever belonging to it. The family's conversations revolve around travel, art exhibitions, letters received from distant acquaintances, and perhaps subtle alliances within the social calendar. Everything seems graceful, lighter than the heavy workday realities experienced by those who serve them. But elegance to carry strain. Appearances must be maintained. Every word is measured. Every gesture obeys invisible rules. Even laughter is tempered, charming, never uncontrolled. Beneath the chandeliers and floral arrangements, there exists a constant whisper. Do not falter. Do not embarrass. Never let the illusion slip. After dinner, the house divides itself into evening worlds. In working neighborhoods, once dishes are cleared and washed, families gather around the hearth. Stories pass from older to younger, voices of childhood, folklore, war memories, sometimes songs sung softly in dim light. A newspaper may circulate among the adults, its headlines carrying distant promises and looming uncertainties. Outside, neighbors chat along stoops, share coal when someone runs short, and trade news of births, illnesses, or opportunities. The community operates like a living web, fragile but intensely supportive. And even after the day's tasks are done, household work never truly ends. clothes need mending by lamplight. Boots wait to be repaired. Bread dough is prepared for the morning. The sound of needle and thread is as much a part of evening as any conversation. The sense of duty extends into every hour, shaping character through repetition. Middle-class evenings often include small entertainments. A daughter might practice piano, her notes floating into hallways where parents read quietly. A son may study by candlelight, eyes heavy yet ambitious. Letters are written carefully composed messages to friends, relatives, or potential suitors. Domestic intimacy here coexists with aspiration. The walls hold framed photographs, certificates, reminders that life can progress if one follows the rules well enough and works patiently. Yet the servant's night stretches longer after the family relaxes. She scrubs pots, polishes tins, irons shirts for tomorrow. Her body aches, but she rarely complains. Her future depends on references, reputation, and obedience. Sometimes she pauses, listening to laughter upstairs, and wonders about lives shaped by choices rather than circumstances. Then, with a sigh, she returns to her tasks. Dreams are folded carefully away, like linens placed back in their cupboard. For the wealthy, evenings may include visiting guests, card games, music recital in the drawing room, or long discussions near crackling fireplaces. Young daughters perform to showcase accomplishments, singing, playing violin, demonstrating poised conversation. Matches are considered subtly, not openly discussed, but always present in parental glances. The family name travels through each gathering like an invisible invitation. Everything from how one pours tea to how one responds to a compliment, part of an unspoken test. Still, beyond class and privilege, there are common threads binding all Edwardian families. As night deepens, lamps dim, fires burn to embers. The outside world grows quieter, punctuated only by occasional carriage wheels, a distant factory whistle, or the call of a night watchman. Inside bedrooms, routines unfold with familiarity. Children kneel for evening prayers, whispering hopes for safety, success at school, or a loved one's improved health. Parents tuck blankets tight, checking windows, securing doors. Even those who have little still cling fiercely to dignity. Fresh water in a basin, a folded shirt laid out for the morning, shoes positioned side by side like small promises. Sleep, however, is not entirely restful for everyone. Workers worry about layoffs or injuries that could plunge the family into crisis. Mothers wonder whether the cough in a child's chest will pass or worsen. Servants fear mistakes that could cost them their position. And among the upper class, concerns take different shapes: pressures to sustain social rank, to manage estates wisely, to marry advantageously. Anxiety follows wealth just as surely as it follows poverty, only disguised more elegantly. Beyond these private concerns lies a broader unease that few can yet name. The newspapers speak of alliances, arms races, political tensions, and distant conflicts. But for now, they seem remote issues to be discussed, not lived. Families read them, debate lightly, then fold the pages away. They cannot see that history is quietly placing cracks beneath the familiar foundation of their lives. Perhaps a mother senses it when she looks at her sons and wonders what sort of men they will be asked to become. Perhaps a father feels it in those moments when he lingers at the door, sensing that the future may require more than steady labor. But night has a way of softening such thoughts, covering them with routine and the peaceful illusion of continuity. As quiet settles fully over Edwardian streets, you begin to understand something essential. Family life in this era is not just about meals, chores, and rituals. It is about identity anchored to roles that feel unchangeable. Each person, father, mother, son, daughter, servant, occupies a clearly defined place, taught by repetition and reinforced by society. Some find comfort in that certainty. Others, though they cannot yet say it aloud, feel the beginnings of restlessness. The homes themselves become metaphors. Modest cottages with soot-darkened walls show endurance. Middle-class terraces reflect aspiration wrapped in restraint. Stately mansions display confidence, part pride, part performance. Together, these households create the fabric of a society convinced of its stability, unaware of the tests to come. Finally, one by one, lights go out. Coal settles to quiet gray crumbs. The last footsteps fade upstairs. Across cities, villages, and countryside estates, Edwardian families slip into sleep, believing that tomorrow will resemble today, predictable, ordered, governed by the same timetables and traditions. The fathers will rise to work. The mothers will manage households. Children will learn, help, and grow into the roles already imagined for them, and yet unseen beyond the horizon. A new century is gathering force. Technology is accelerating. Social movements are awakening, and global tensions are inching toward eruption. None of that fully intrudes upon these peaceful bedrooms. Not yet. Tonight, there is only the gentle breathing of families at rest, and aware that the world they believe so solid is already beginning to change. As the Edwardian world moved beyond the rituals of daily work and evening meals, families also carved out moments that revealed who they were when duty briefly loosened its grip. These were the hours of leisure and quiet pleasure, when people laughed more freely, when curiosity reached beyond necessity, and when the era's hopes and contradictions became especially clear. Watching how Edwardian families spent these spared moments tells as much about them as their work routines ever could. It shows their dreams, their limits, and the subtle ways life was beginning to stretch toward change. For many working-class families, leisure existed only in small pockets wedged carefully between exhaustion and sleep. Sunday was the most precious of these intervals. Factories slowed or fell silent. Outdoor markets buzzed with life, and streets filled with families, dressed in their best clothes, walking with a sense of pride that came from being temporarily free from industrial schedules. Children polished their shoes, mothers inspected collars, and fathers stood a little straighter than usual. Even when garments were worn thin, they were brushed, stitched, and cared for as symbols of dignity. Much of Sunday centered around church or chapel. The bells echoed across neighborhoods, their tones weaving through brick terraces and smoky rooftops. Faith offered comfort and community, but it also served as a moral compass. Families filed into pews, boys fidgeting, girls smoothing their dresses, parents attentive, and they listened to sermons that reinforced values of humility, duty, respect, and perseverance. The words often spoke of reward, not in this life, but in the next, reminding listeners that endurance had meaning beyond the daily grind. Afterwards, Steps slowed outside the doors as people greeted neighbors, shared news, or quietly discussed the topics that struck deepest. Yet leisure wasn't only solemn. After church, children rolled hoops or kicked balls. Parents spread simple meals on blankets, and music sometimes drifted from a nearby bandstand. For just a few hours, the city's noise receded. The air felt lighter. People remembered that life could hold moments of gentleness, even within hardship. For other families, leisure might mean a visit to the seaside, a holiday that required saving pennies over many months. Trains made such escapes more accessible than ever before. When the chance finally came, children ran toward the shoreline with cries of delight, shoes abandoned, trousers rolled above the knee, skirts lifted just slightly to avoid the surf. Vendors sold sticks of rock candy, bright umbrellas dotted the sand, and laughter rode the wind. Working men and women, accustomed to grime and noise, stood quietly at the water's edge, letting the waves wash over their feet, as though the sea itself might rinse away the weight of worry. Meanwhile, leisure for middle-class families unfolded with greater predictability and polish. Afternoons might be devoted to tea in the drawing room, fine china, small cakes, neatly sliced bread and butter, and carefully measured conversation. Guests were invited, introductions practiced, and social etiquette rehearsed like a script. The drawing room became a stage where manners mattered as much as companionship. Children observed from the edges, absorbing lessons about composure, diplomatic smiles, and careful phrasing. It was here more than in any classroom that they learned the subtle language of respectability. Books, too, played a central role in leisure. Shelves lined with novels, volumes of poetry, travel journals, and scientific works hinted at dreams of intellectual expansion. Parents encouraged reading, partly out of moral belief that good literature shaped strong character, and partly from ambition. To be well read was to signal advancement, education, and possibility. A son might lose himself in adventure stories about explorers braving unknown lands, while his sister, though limited in what society expected of her future, find herself quietly inspired by heroines who exhibited intelligence, resilience, or courage. Music filled many middle-class evenings. The family piano stood not merely as decoration, but as proof of cultivation. Daughters spent years practicing scales, learning songs that could be presented to guests as evidence of refinement. The ability to play beautifully made a young woman seem more marriageable, more graceful, more accomplished. Yet inside those rehearsed performances, something genuine often bloomed: an emotional voice, a way of expressing feelings that could not otherwise be spoken openly. Fathers might pause from reading the paper simply to listen, smiling, faintly reminded that domestic life held beauty beyond responsibility. Even leisure, however, reflected hierarchy. Servant girls rarely enjoyed the same slow afternoons. While families entertained or relaxed, servants polished trays, boiled kettles, trimmed lamps, and carried refreshments from kitchen to parlor. Their moments of leisure came late, squeezed into fragile slivers of night when feet throbbed and eyelids drooped. A few pages of a borrowed book, a quiet conversation whispered to another made by the scullery door, or a brief step outside to feel the evening air, these became their treasures. The contrast between relaxation above stairs and labor below stairs was constant, shaping how each person viewed their place in the world. For the wealthy, leisure functioned almost as a profession in itself. It was not merely enjoyed, was curated. House parties, calendars, vast lawns became settings for croquet, tennis, and leisurely strolls. Guests arrived with trunks and valets, greeted by butlers who ensured every visit flowed with elegance. The rituals of hospitality reinforced alliances, encouraged advantageous marriages, and subtly measured social standing. To refuse an invitation at the wrong moment could ripple into gossip. To host poorly could damage reputation for years. Leisure here was both pleasure and performance. Carriages rolled through manicured grounds. Women in elaborate gowns shaded themselves with parasols, and men discussed political currents or estate matters while appearing perfectly relaxed. Music drifted from grand pianos and string quartets. Candlelit halls glowed late into the night, while servants in livery moved with quiet choreography. These evenings could feel almost magical, removed from the struggles of ordinary life. Yet underneath the brilliance lay pressure, a daughter's posture at dinner, a misplaced remark, an unfashionable dress. Any small misstep might shape social fortune. Wealth did not erase anxiety, it simply dressed it in silk. As the Edwardian years progressed, leisure began to reveal something else: the impact of modernization on imagination, the arrival of cinema's flickering picture houses that turned shadows into storytelling astonished audiences. Families who could afford a ticket lined up to see moving images of faraway places, comedic mishaps, and heroic adventures. Children stared wide-eyed, astonished that pictures could come to life. For many, it sparked new dreams of travel, of romance, of worlds beyond their quiet streets. The idea that entertainment could transport people not only from homes, but from the expectations that shaped those homes was quietly revolutionary. Likewise, organized sports gained momentum. Boys kicked footballs in open fields, while newspapers began celebrating athletes as icons. Athleticism became tied to character discipline, teamwork, fairness, and parents encouraged participation as part of moral upbringing. Spectatorship, too, wove itself into leisure culture. Crowds gathered at matches, cheering together, sharing jubilant energy that crossed class boundaries more freely than most spaces allowed. For a few hours, supporters united through excitement rather than social division. Women's leisure experienced transformation as well, though often constrained. Middle-class ladies formed reading circles, charity organizations, and social clubs, ostensibly focused on improvement or benevolence. These gatherings quietly nurtured discussion about rights, education, and independence. Mothers brought daughters along, exposing them to conversations that hinted that their futures might not need to be as limited as tradition insisted. These seeds of change were planted gently, without open rebellion, but they grew nonetheless. At the same time, the fashion of strolling along promenades, especially in seaside towns or city parks, created spaces where families displayed themselves publicly. Clothing served as visual language. Hats, gloves, and tailored garments communicated status. People walked not only for air and exercise, but to be seen and assessed in this world. Reputation floated quietly beside every individual like a shadow. A misbuttoned coat, a scuffed shoe, or behavior perceived as inappropriate could draw silent judgment. Leisure, therefore, was never entirely free. It existed inside invisible boundaries. Evenings provided another canvas for leisure. Lanterns and gaslights transformed city streets into glowing ribbons, inviting families to theaters and music halls. Comedy acts, singers, acrobats, and dramatic productions entertained audiences from all classes, though theaters themselves remained socially stratified. Boxes and balcony seats offered privacy and prestige. Cheaper gallery seats overflowed with laughter, cheers, and occasional heckling. The performances reflected life exaggerated, dreams heightened, sorrows made poetic, injustices dramatized. People left with minds buzzing, hearts lighter, and sometimes with quiet reflection about their own circumstances. Yet leisure could also deepen inequalities. While middle-class children practiced piano or attended school picnics, working-class children sometimes passed evenings selling newspapers, helping with home-based piecework, or caring for younger siblings. Their games were quick, improvisational skipping, ropes, marbles, chalk drawings on worn pavements, squeezed in between chores. Their imaginations still flourished, but responsibility pressed on them too soon. Family storytelling bridged many divides. Grandparents recounted tales of earlier decades, Victorian hardships, rural memories, or dramatic moves to bustling cities. These stories stitched generations together, reminding children that history did not live only in books, but in the lives of people they loved. Around fireplaces and kitchen tables, laughter mingled with cautionary wisdom. Courage, sacrifice, and resilience were preserved not by formal schooling, but by spoken word passed quietly through time. Perhaps the most revealing aspect of Edwardian leisure was how strongly it revolved around community. Village fetes, seasonal fairs, and neighborhood celebrations gathered families into shared joy. Bright ribbons fluttered on poles, sweets filled stalls, and games invited both children and adults to participate. Dancing under strings of lanterns, people forgot class differences for a few hours, swaying to melodies that belonged to everyone. These gatherings reminded families that despite strict hierarchies, they occupied the same fragile world, dependent on one another more than society often admitted. Behind all these activities, however, hovered the deeper purpose of leisure: restoration. The relentlessness of work, the pressure of expectations, the discipline demanded by social norms of it required release. Without moments of laughter, music, conversation, or reflection, the Edwardian structure might have cracked sooner than it did. Leisure acted as a quiet safety valve, soothing tensions before they erupted and helping families maintain balance between duty and humanity. Yet leisure also whispered change. As people read new books, watched new films, attended rallies around fireplaces and kitchen tables, laughter mingled with cautionary wisdom. Courage, sacrifice, and resilience were preserved not by formal schooling, but by spoken word passed quietly through time. Perhaps the most revealing aspect of Edwardian leisure was how strongly it revolved around community. Village fetes, seasonal fairs, and neighborhood celebrations gathered families into shared joy. Bright ribbons fluttered on poles, sweets filled stalls, and games invited both children and adults to participate. Dancing under strings of lanterns, People forgot class differences for a few hours, swaying to melodies that belonged to everyone. These gatherings reminded families that despite strict hierarchies, they occupied the same fragile world, dependent on one another more than society often admitted. Behind all these activities, however, hovered the deeper purpose of leisure, restoration, the relentlessness of work, the pressure of expectations, the discipline demanded by social norms. Of it required release. Without moments of laughter, music, conversation, or reflection, the Edwardian structure might have cracked sooner than it did. Leisure acted as a quiet safety valve, soothing tensions before they erupted and helping families maintain balance between duty and humanity. Yet leisure also whispered change. As people read new books, watched new films, attended rallies, or overheard debates about suffrage and labor rights, they began to imagine alternate futures. Workers started to question whether days must always be so punishing. Women wondered why intellect should remain confined to parlors and piano lessons. Young men viewed the world not only as a ladder of obedience, but as a stage of possibility. Leisure unintentionally became a classroom for dissatisfaction, a place where minds had just enough space to explore different possibilities. Technology played an intriguing role in this evolution. Telephones began to creep into wealthier homes, knitting communication more tightly and shrinking emotional distance. Gramophones allowed music to travel into living rooms without the need for performers, transforming rainy evenings into intimate concerts. Cameras captured frozen moments of family outings, children squinting against the sun, mothers smoothing hair just as the shutter clicked there, by preserving emotion in a way previous generations had never experienced. Photographs turned ordinary moments into memory anchors, reminding future viewers that even simple Sundays held private worlds worth remembering. Still, leisure was never evenly distributed. Some families lived so close to the edge that rest itself felt dangerous. A pause meant lost wages, and lost wages could mean hunger. For them, leisure became largely spiritual rather than material, a shared joke, a lullaby, a stolen moment, watching sunset over factory chimneys. Their resilience created beauty out of scarcity, making even tiny graces meaningful as we observe these families. Another truth becomes evident. Leisure shaped not only how they lived, but how they loved. Walks taken together, letters exchanged across distances, board games played by lamplight, and quiet moments spent sitting side by side. These experiences wove emotional intimacy into the fabric of daily survival. They taught children that connection mattered. They reminded adults why work was endured. Without leisure, relationships would have become purely functional, stripped of warmth. With it, the Edwardian home, despite its strictness and inequalities, still pulsed with human tenderness. And beyond every park bench, concert hall, and seaside promenade stretched a horizon unknowingly darkening. The laughter at fairs, the music drifting from ballrooms, the applause echoing inside theaters, all would soon be pierced by world-shaking events. But at that moment, the Edwardian family did not sense impending rupture. They believed leisure was simply a pleasant reward for effort, not the last calm before upheaval. They rested, they celebrated, they planned holidays and dances and summer excursions, unaware that history was quietly counting down. Looking back, what makes Edwardian Leisure so compelling is how fragile it seems. These ordinary moments, father teaching his child to ride a bicycle, a mother reading aloud by the fire, sisters whispering secrets in the garden feel almost like glass. They glimmer gently, holding light. Yet any sudden shock could shatter them. We know what lies ahead. They did not. And so, when we imagine these families scattered across towns and countryside, filling their evenings and weekends with small joys and rituals, we see more than nostalgia. We see the last chapter of a world that believed order was permanent, and progress was gentle. Leisure allowed them to dream, but those dreams were still framed by rules formed in an earlier century. They were stretching, yes, but not yet breaking free. Soon, however, pressures of politics, industry, technology, and social reform would challenge those old structures in ways no one could fully predict. But before that reckoning came, Edwardian families cherished their moments of companionship and escape, clinging to them as proof that life was more than obligation. In gardens, theaters, parks, parlors, and along endless shorelines, they built memories, not knowing how precious they would become